District schedules are heating up, and that always makes for good football. We'll recap all the top stories on this week's Varsity 360 right now. Hello everyone and welcome to Varsity 360's Gridiron Report. I'm Mark Coleman from the Virginia Varsity Sports Network, here to take a look at the week's top stories in Fredericksburg area high school football. Very happy you found us here at flsvarsity.com, and as always, happy to be joined by a member of the FLS Varsity team, one of my favorite sports writers from the Freelance Star. It is Mr. T. Nathan Warters. Nathan, good to see you, buddy.
Good to see you, Mark.
You're looking awfully nice and clean shaven, sharp as always.
Thanks.
Exciting time in the sports world of late, yes?
Yeah, we got a lot of stuff going on, and high school kind of tops the list there.
Yeah. Well, let's jump right into it. We have our game of the week. It was a county rivalry between Massaponax and Riverbend. Quite honestly, it hasn't been much of a rivalry just yet, though. Ponax has won each of the previous 9 meetings between these two teams. They entered the game at 5-0 and sitting atop the FLS Power Poll rankings. As they did last week, Ponax got out to a quick start. On their second possession, they are backed up deep in their own territory. It's no concern for Bo Fields. Fields takes the handoff and finds a big hole up the middle, and he is through it fast. 93 yards on the score. Ponax leads it 7-0. Early in the second quarter, Joey Benden calls his own number. He hits the hole quickly. 41 yards on the touchdown run. It looks like the route is on. 21-0 Ponax. Someone forgot to tell Riverbend to roll over, though. Orlando Jones burst through a hole in the middle of the Ponax defense, carries it in for 20 yards and the score. Lance DeSilva would tack on a 43-yard field goal as time expired in the second quarter. The halftime lead, Massaponax 21, Riverbend 10. The Bears marched down the field on their opening drive of the second half, capped by a Dakota Sexton 1-yard run. The score is now 21-17 Ponax. The Panthers would respond with a long drive of their own. Bo Fields busts through for 17 yards. He would have 158 yards on the night. Joey Benden, boy, he does hit the hole quickly. 23 yards on this carry. Joey Benden would have 131 yards rushing on the game. Tristan Medina finds pay dirt from 3 yards out. Massaponax with 413 yards rushing in this game. As always, an impressive performance. However, Bend counters. Jordan DeMarco with a drive starting from the Bend 9-yard line. He hits C.J. Washington over the middle for a nice gain. Washington with 11 catches for 108 yards. And then DeMarco finds Chris Pritchett in the end zone. A nice over-the-shoulder pass and catch. The 2-point conversion attempt fails. The score is now 28-23. Time for the onside kick. DeSilva gets the nice hop, but the Panthers' hands team secures the ball. Massaponax would be able to run out the clock and escape with the victory. The final score 28-23. Massaponax goes to 6-0 on the season. An impressive performance, Nathan, by both teams, quite honestly. Ponax getting out to that quick start, a lot of yards rushing. That's no surprise from this Panthers team. They certainly look strong.
What really stands out, every time I see these highlights, it's just how fast Massaponax's offense is. All these guys, it's not like they have, the power back and the speed back. They're just all just lightning fast down the field. And every one of these big plays, it's just who's going to catch them? That's the question.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say I was really impressed by how quickly they hit the holes. I watched this game film, and I could have picked out 20 different plays to show just how quickly they turn it upfield. Fields, Benden, Medina, all of them, they seem to be coached very well. They executed extremely well for much of this game. Riverbend made it tight. Props to Riverbend. They came back. They did not roll over. They got blown out last year. They certainly were able to show something in this game, but that's an awfully talented Massaponax team.
Yeah, you do give the Bears a lot of credit, and they, a lot of pride on the line there, especially after last year. That was one of the games that I was at. I think in the first quarter that game was over with last year. To be able to come back and to be able to make it as close and as competitive as they did, this is a notch in the belt for Riverbend, and this isn't anything for them to hang their heads about, because Massaponax is clearly our best team, and they're clearly running over everybody. So And, Eric Ludden, the coach for Massaponax, said something interesting in the newspaper. He warned his team, they're not all going to be easy, and give credit for Riverbend not making it easy for these guys.
Yeah. Impressive how Massaponax continues to find so many offensive weapons. They just continue to roll. So Ponax goes to 6-0 on the year. Riverbend drops to 3-3. Final score: Massaponax 28, Riverbend 23. Number 3 in the Fredericksburg Power Poll, James Monroe took a trip out to the Northern Neck and visited Essex, and it turned out to be a pretty impressive little trip there for the Yellow Jackets, Nathan. James Monroe coming away with the 37-14 victory. Keyshawn Johnson with a pretty impressive game.
Yeah, this is a kid who he's a senior, and all of a sudden these colleges are all lining up for his services. I think transferring over to James Monroe, getting some more exposure, playing for a team of the caliber of the Yellow Jackets has really gotten the attention of a lot of college coaches. He's just already got an offer from Indiana. I think he just recently got one from Hampton. Made an unofficial visit to Virginia over the weekend. So, he's putting up the numbers, 4 catches, 102 yards, touchdown. He also had 2 picks. One of them led to a touchdown. So, huge game for him. Going on the road and beating Essex, Essex is a 1A team, but these are former Northern Neck District rivals, and it's not always easy to go to Essex and win. So, an impressive victory for the Yellow Jackets.
Absolutely. JM moves to 4-1 on the season. They actually forced 5 turnovers from Essex, and won that one pretty handily. Number 5, Colonial Forge, meanwhile, was able to handle Brook Point quite easily, winning by a score of 44-6. Ramon Miller with a big game, 15 carries, 218 yards, and 3 touchdowns rushing, and a couple of receptions as well, 48 yards receiving. Miller looks to be a pretty good running back for the Eagles there.
I think Colonial Forge is starting to find their offensive identity, and it's running the football, and it's giving the ball to Ramon Miller and Jamal Brown at quarterback. He's also running a lot. Early in the year, I think they were trying to kind of figure out what they were going to do with all the skill they had, because they do have a lot of skill. And Ramon Miller rushed really well in that first game against Highland Springs, and then they've kind of morphed into what they are now. And they've run a lot recently, and defensively they're stopping the run. So that's been the key for them is keeping the ball on the ground and keeping the other team from pushing it around on the ground as well.
If you've been following FLS Varsity on Twitter, you'll know that they have been posting playoff scenarios, and I know that Colonial Forge, in that strange 6A South, they've got two divisions, I don't even know what they call it, conferences. I'm not sure what they call it, but 8 from each group goes. And if the playoffs, if the season ended right now, Colonial Forge would actually be in the playoffs at 3-3, thanks really entirely to that very difficult schedule that they faced early in the season. This is a team that we were a little bit worried about. We talked about the fact that they needed to start winning. This certainly is a big win and a big move in that direction. Meanwhile, Brook Point falls to 2-4, and they may be just on the outside looking in. Still a lot of games to be played, understood, but as we start looking at the playoff scenarios, something to keep in mind there. So Colonial Forge with the 44-6 victory over Brook Point. Taking a look at other games around the area, North Stafford and Stafford met in a matchup of another county rivalry here that hasn't been all that close of late. North Stafford with the 35-0 shutout of Stafford. Nathan, Nakeem Morton substituted for an injured Malachi Harrison and did a fairly substantial job at running back.
Yeah, 191 yards, 3 touchdowns. I think it was really important for them to kind of get back to that, run the football, mix it up, because they were against Briarwoods, against Mountain View, they were really pass heavy because they didn't have a healthy tailback. I mean, Morton was hurting as well during those games. So to get back to running the football, that was really key for them, and for him to come out and have a game like that really bodes well, especially going into a game like Colonial Forge this week for North Stafford.
Certainly. Meanwhile, King William with a 47-7 victory over Caroline. Malik King for King William with 4 carries, 135 yards, and a touchdown rushing. That's a pretty good average right there.
Yeah.
I can't do the numbers in my head real quick, but I think it's better than 25, 30 yards a carry.
It's over 30.
It's over 30. We're sitting here taking off our shoes and doing the mental math and struggling. Jacob Jones for King William, 14 of 21 passing, 281 yards and a touchdown. He also ran the ball 14 times for 83 yards and 2 touchdowns. running. That's a pretty impressive stat line there for Jacob Jones. Meanwhile, Kamaji Petros also with 3 receptions, 125 yards receiving. He was the recipient of 2 of those touchdown passes from Jones. Also around the area, Washington and Lee remains undefeated, a 28-10 victory over Spotsy. This game was a little bit closer at halftime than expected.
Yeah, and I think they came out and kind of realized what they had to do to take care of business, but a little bit of a shock there early for Washington and Lee, but they got the victory.
Colonial Beach with a 35-6 win over Charles City. Boy, Lamar Lucas just continues to put the stats up, doesn't he?
And this team is rolling. I mean, they had the loss to King George there, and it was so close in overtime. They continue to win, and Lamar is he's, like I said last week, he's making a name for himself. He might be in that Player of the Year picture in the area. 22
carries, 184 yards, and 2 touchdowns rushing in the victory over Charles City. Orange gets their first victory of the year, 42-19 victory over Fluvanna. D'Angelo Hurt with a nice game for Orange.
Yeah, good for them to finally get into the win column there, and maybe that could lead to some good things here in the second half of the season.
Hurt with 2 long touchdown runs of 76 and 63 yards. Meanwhile, Powhatan was able to down Louisa 28-6. I believe that Louisa actually scored Trey Cherry with a touchdown to open this, but Powhatan was able to right the ship fairly quickly.
Yeah, it's been kind of an up and down season for Louisa, but at 3 wins, they're already over their win total from last year. So I think they're building something there, and they just got to bounce back from this one.
Culpeper gets a shutout, 35-0 over Brentsville. Eli Marks from Culpeper, 4 receptions for 136 yards and 2 touchdowns, and Culpeper gets the victory.
Huge game for him, and he's becoming one of the best receivers in the area. Marks is.
Yeah, absolutely. We also have a final Fredericksburg Christian with a 23-7 victory over Pope John Paul the Great. Fredericksburg Christian remains undefeated on the season. Some impressive stats from this game as well. This is a team that might have something special going on here.
Yeah, and they play Virginia Episcopal this week, and that's a team that they have a history with. They lost in the state semis against those guys last year, lost in the state championship the year before. VS comes to Fredericksburg, on Friday, so a big game for Fredericksburg Christian.
Absolutely. FCS is 5-0 on the year. They are number 1 in the VISAA Division III polls. In fact, their power poll ranking is the best of any of the independent schools. So FCS certainly putting up some impressive numbers. Blair Lawson with 12 carries, 122 yards rushing, and James Plord 20 carries, 98 yards rushing, and a touchdown for FCS. Taking a look at games coming up this week, we will start with a pretty big one. North Stafford will hit the road to visit Colonial Forge. A couple of pretty good teams here. This should be an interesting game.
Yeah, and what's interesting is Forge has won 7 of 8. So I think North Stafford has, obviously, from last year getting shut out. They got shut out the year before. North Stafford has, some added incentive to play well in this game. But I think both teams, they're still trying to find themselves a little bit, dealing with injuries, dealing with different personnel things. So this will be a big game for both in terms of kind of moving forward and getting into that playoff form. Both teams are playoff teams.
Yes.
It's just a matter of, jockeying for position, bragging rights as well.
Certainly. So if I've got this right, so the last 3 games have been shutouts. The last 2, Colonial Forge did the damage. The game before that, North Stafford actually shut out Colonial Forge. So will the trend continue?
I don't think it will.
I don't think it will either. I would say no.
Last year was a weird game. It was in the rain. It was 12-0. It was a bizarre game. I think, provided the elements you don't get in the way, I think this will be a fairly competitive football game.
Sure. Well, JM will hit the road. James Monroe will visit the Foxes out in King George. James Monroe has a pretty good stranglehold on a playoff spot in the Division III. King George, though, is really battling to make it in on the 4A.
Yeah, and this would be a nice opportunity for them to get a big win there. King George beat them last year, so another one of those matchups where one team has got a little bit more motivation than the other in terms of payback, and then King George has the playoff factor. So this could be a real interesting game. Could be a close game. It seems like King George is kind of rounding into form. They've had a couple victories here in the last few weeks, so we'll see how that goes.
Playing out on the field turf at King George, I suspect that this could be a high-scoring game, actually. I'm interested to see how many yards receiving Keyshawn Johnson ends up.
I think both teams have a lot of athletes, and, you could be right. It could be just a
track meet.
Yeah.
We'll see. And then a matchup of two, almost said undefeated, winless teams, actually. Caroline will visit Chancellor, two teams looking for their first wins of the season. Two pretty good clubs here, though.
Yeah, prideful organizations, programs. I really think, judging from last week, Caroline's still trying to kind of find themselves. Obviously, Chancellor without a win, they're probably in the same position. So this is an important week. One of them's going to get a win, one of them's going to get a nice boost here for the stretch run, and the other's going to still be searching for that victory.
Something to build on, sure. Well, I hope that you're able to catch a good high school football game around the area. Friday looks like it's going to be a good night. The weatherman at least tells us that hopefully the rain will hold off. I certainly hope that will be the case, and hope that you're able to find a good football game in the area, and that you check back with us next week for our next installment of Varsity 360. As always, happy to have you here. Always enjoy talking high school football with my good friend, Nathan Warters. Nathan, thanks for the time.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
Yeah, always, man. Well, that's going to do it for this week's installment. For the Virginia Varsity Sports Network, my name is Mark Coleman. Thanks for watching, everyone.